podcast.
We need to start. Seriously. We need to start a Walmart secret society because everybody shops at Walmart. If you're within driving distance of a Walmart, I don't know if everybody on the line is. I know Bob lives in Kentucky, so that's a pretty good shot. Kyle, you got a Walmart down the road?
I got to go to Weirton, West Virginia, but yeah.
Is it like within? Is it within like a reasonable distance? Like, yeah, I'm going to go to Walmart today to go shopping.
20 minutes.
Okay, that's not bad. Okay.
Now, I find it interesting that Kyle and I both live in a situation where West Virginia is nearby. Like right across the border from here in Kentucky, like I'm on the border, is West Virginia, right? And for Kyle,
that's the Mississippi of the North.
So, yeah. For me, I have the Panhandle Trail. There's literally a sign. It's 9 miles to the West Virginia state line.
Oh wow. I don't know whether to feel happy for you or sad for you.
That's about 10 miles.
Is it a pretty part of West Virginia that's sparsely populated?
I mean, there's a nude colony.
A nudist colony? Oh man, he cut out at the absolute worst part of the time because this conversation was fixing to get spicy.
Now, isn't there a Hare Krishna temple up there too?
Oh, it
close to where you're at?
I think so, but the big thing where I'm at, it's like weird because you get off of Three Springs in Weirton, and there's some really good restaurants, and you get to the end of Three Springs Road, it just gets dicey. You get to see like it's like weird because it's like it's a 5 mile stretch for me, like that Panhandle's 5 miles to Steubenville, Ohio, and it's like you can't like so much fucked up shit happens in such a little sliver of the world there.
No, I've also found that interesting that you're also close to Ohio because that's the way it is here. It's where Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia all meet. And there's an island in the middle of where the Ohio River and the Big Sandy River meets. That's all. You're in all three states at the same time somehow, and it's called Canova. I don't know if that's
We got so Steubenville when you get into Ohio. That's the home of Dean Martin, and you find that out really, really fast because it's Dean Martin Way. There's
Dean Martin is and will always be an important American.
Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. So let me ask you this, Kyle. How many pig fuckers can you find up in West Virginia?
I don't know necessarily.
You've never seen anybody fucking a pig up there?
Not necessarily.
I was envisioning that being more of an Arkansas thing.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
That part of West Virginia, you get like the weirdos, and it's like you know the difference between like Weirton Heights, where it's like the affluent part of Weirton, to then like New Cumberland, like downtown Weirton by Weirton Steel. And like Chester, West Virginia, you got some weird motherfuckers there.
You ever see that movie Gummo? You've never seen Gummo? Oh my God! Please educate yourself because that is an amazing movie. It's actually set in Xenia, Ohio, but the movie was actually filmed in Tennessee. I don't want to give away too much if you've never seen it. It is a weird trip of a movie, and I think once you watch it, you'll see the people that you're describing right now.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I've been down a YouTube rabbit hole lately, with several different acts, and the whole entire continent of Australia keeps coming up on my feed. Bands like Tropical Fuckstorm, which is Garrett Liddith, from the band Moons, which were kind of a minor sensation here in the States in the early 2000s. Very, punk kind of no wave kind of, it's really hard to describe, very descriptive narrative to the lyrics. There's just these stories that pour out of this man, and has started a new band with his, I can't remember if it's his girlfriend or wife, who's also a front woman for another band there in Perth. and have made this monster of a band called Tropical Fuckstorm. And I started with them and started working my way through the scene. The one name that has kept coming up for probably the past 10 years now that I keep hearing about is this band called, and it's the weirdest band name ever, King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard. If you have not checked these guys out yet, they are completely propping up the whole psychedelic rock scene for the entire earth right now. But equal parts King Crimson, Fish. There's a little bit of Elton John in spots. This is one of the most, freakishly good bands I've heard in a long time that exist on their own plane. And you're going to hear so many bits and pieces of other bands that you love, and then they'll shift gears and there'll be kind of vapor trails of that band, but then they shift into something else. And jazz and pop and new wave and metal. Oh my God, their metal records are fucking tight as shit, man. King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard. You'll have to say that 3 times fast in order to get it right, but man, you're never going to forget this band once you really get into what they got going on. Another band that is really, really, really making some big waves down there is also Amel and the Sniffers. Punk band, a whole lot of fucking balls on this female-led punk band. Definitely
like
want to check that out.
Like amyl nitrate, amyl nitrate, that amyl.
Well, I'm trying to keep it PG, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really there's so much, particularly in the whole realm of psychedelic rock. If you love Flaming Lips, pretty much anything from Pink Floyd, you really need to check out what Australia's got going on throughout the whole continent, because there's so much good music popping up every fucking where.
Hell yeah! I listened to the King Lizard thing. And man, they was rocking. I was really impressed. He was basically doing metal, but it sounded, the tone of it was new wave. But he was playing metal, and he was using a Rickenbacker guitar, and I found that fascinating, a hollow body.
Yeah, but did you listen to the second track that I sent you, or at least just a snippet of it? Because it's completely 1,000% different. But as soon as you hear it, you know it's the same band. It is the most freakishly amazing thing I've heard in a long time, because there's a lot of bands that do that and they shift genres and then they try to almost completely, sound like they're another band. Garth Brooks, I'm looking at you. But yeah, I've never, this is just something fascinating to me. I'm a big Frank Zappa guy, so, I'm already kind of preconditioned for that sort of thing anyways. Frank covered a lot of ground when he was, in his short tenure. You think about it, Frank only made it to what, 50, 51? That's young.
Yeah, but his catalog is just immense.
And it's still coming out. They're still pulling, he's got thousands of recorded and mixed hours worth of material with so many different musicians that cover a wide spectrum of popular music over the past, 40 years or so, 50 years or so.
No, I got
I'm
a
also
friend.
a big Captain Beefheart guy too. I love weird shit. I love weird shit, especially if it makes you move your ass.
Now I got a friend in Chicago that's got a basement full, and it's all it is shelves of reel-to-reel tapes of the Grateful Dead. And he was a member of the Families, right? And they let him record, and he had his own Akai reel-to-reel, and somehow was able to set it up. And he's got thousands of tapes of the Grateful Dead for 30 years worth of them. And it's just amazing. He had the same Akai reel-to-reel sitting on top of a Sansui 9090 DB, just like mine, and 2 clip horns, and it sounded amazing. It was special. It was like,
look, I hate to be that guy, but I'm gonna go ahead, and since we love to slaughter sacred cows on this show in the very short run of our existence, I'm other than really a big Dead fan. I'm not really a big Fish fan either, man. I'm not. I really cannot fucking. I'm gonna get all the way up on my soapbox with this one and straighten my tie. I cannot fucking stand Widespread Panic. I think that is one of the biggest fucking scams of the music industry in the past 40 years.
I can't name one of their songs.
No, I can't either.
what was the one? I can't get high anymore. I remember that song. And I only knew that because I happened to work in the brief time that I worked in radio at the radio station when that dropped.
So it was kind of apropos, Doug, whenever you were saying something about Mississippi and whatnot. I'm looking at a young musician named Chris Stone Kingfish Ingram. I mean, hopefully.
Oh boy, here we go. I love this young man. He is the fun to watch live of just about anybody I can think of right now in any genre.
For a person with Asperger's syndrome, it's pretty amazing what this young man has been able to do. He's huge. Like, if you love Muddy Waters and you really love the blues, this guy, I'm just going to refer to him as Kingfish. You see it, and he puts on with a modern flair. It's laced with a little bit of gospel in some areas, some blues rock, some soul to it. This young guy has jammed already on stage with guys like Buddy Guy, the Tedeschi Trucks Band. His breakthrough album, when he released a few years ago, 662, that's a fantastic record. It's, to me, when you were reading the folks that were saying, like, this guy's a blues prodigy, he kind of lived up to it. And in my opinion, whenever I tell people, a lot of people up my way, I mean, Marcus King's another one, and everyone's really into him, but a lot of people don't know Kingfish up in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, and Kingfish, that's a Mississippi boy right there. And we actually had this on our last podcast talking about name one band that made it out of Mississippi other than, what was it, Three Doors Down. And then you've got to go back quite a few years to your to the blues, which really didn't get their proper due until much later on in their career or in their lives, if they were lucky to see that kind of success at all. Boy, I bet Robert Johnson would have loved to cash in on that money they made back in the 90s.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I'll just tell people, this guy, he said he's been influenced by Waters, Robert Johnson, B.B. King, Jimi Hendrix, and Prince. And you hear aspects of all these artists through his first two albums. I think it's 662 and Kingfish is the other one.
I believe he just recently won a Grammy. Am I correct in that?
I believe 662 did take home a Grammy. It was either his first album or the second. But I tell people, you just put on that 662 album, a lot of those mid tracks in there, like That's All It Takes, Another Life Goes By, Not Gonna Lie, Too Young to Remember, and even the album like Ender Rock and Roll, some really good tunes. Like I said, I think once you listen to him, this guy's going to just be partner, and I'm really excited what that he can bring into the future. That 662 album is probably one of the better blues albums that I've heard in a very long time, and definitely.
Hey, since you're bringing up the blues, and it's going to bug me if I don't bring it up right now because I'm going to forget about it later. A dear friend of mine that used to come and play at our own last little juke joint we had in Birmingham, Gipp's Place. You can Google it sometime. It's actually a fascinating story. Cedric Burnside, who is the grandson of blues legend R.L. Burnside from the North Mississippi Hill Country. Okay. Cedric actually won a Grammy last year. I think that was the one I was thinking of, because I know that Kingfish won a Grammy, but I know definitely that Cedric won one last year. For his most recent album, which the title, it's going to come to me in just a second. I Be Trying. And definitely check that one out. And check out his stuff in the early to mid 2000s with Lightning Malcolm, that juke joint duo, what is it? Back on it. It's going to come to me in a minute.
I've heard. I've listened
Two
to
man
the
wrecking,
album,
two
and I
man
mean,
wrecking crew, two man
was
wrecking crew. That
because as
album,
soon as I pulled
oh
that
my
up
God!
and I saw the album art, I'm like, I've listened to this. I will double down on it. He's absolutely fantastic, and it's. I think his later stuff, he's really brought a fusion to blues, bringing in an electric component, bringing in a lot of like country, a lot of mountain style blues into it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm just a big fan of the Mississippi country. I got a mad love for all of those guys. Kenny Brown, who was also R.L. Burnside's touring guitar player later on in his career before he passed. That's when he actually got to tour all over the country when he was signed to Fat Possum. And Kenny was his guitar player. Kenny actually played on the most recent Black Keys album. Kenny's a friend of the family too, and lives up in Holly Springs. That's a good dude, man. I'm talking about real, just real, honest to God connection to that the whole entire Mississippi blues scene, which is where it all came, where it all started.
So usually I'm a big fan of country in the vein of outlaw country, right? I loved outlaw
Amen,
country,
brother. Amen.
right? And I really enjoyed it a whole lot, but I hate fake country guys. I mean, I don't want to be negative on the podcast all the time.
And look, just for reference, when you say fake country, what are we talking about here?
I'm talking about guys who these are guys that have a little bit of talent. They go to Nashville, they write their songs for them, they make them in every way. The stuff they sing don't feel genuine to me, right? Which is all a new country. Everything that Nashville's putting out is so slickly produced. They can't even write their own music, and half the time they're still in the song George Jones did 40 years ago. It just don't have any energy to it, and I don't love it. It don't feel real to me. You ever when something don't feel genuine to you, or you don't love it, no matter how good it is, right?
My musical hero Bob Pollard from Guided by Voices refers to that this what you're talking about right now as bubble country.
Yeah, I can't take it.
I call modern country like Eagles cover band.
Nah, the Eagles had Glenn Fry, brother. You can hate on the Eagles all you want to, and trust me, I do a lot of that. But Glenn Fry's all right by me.
No, Carl does.
That's a good man.
Carl has an excellent point because the long run really precipitated fake country, right?
Yeah, you literally hear it, and I love the Eagles. It's just every one of those modern pop country today, they all think they're Glenn Fry and Don Henley. So.
And it's so poppy I can't hardly take it. But then you got Tyler Childress. So I'm sitting here in Appalachia. I'm sitting in a spot literally less than 5 miles from a place where I saw Tyler Childress playing on a friend of mine's porch at a 4th of July celebration, right? In the middle of nowhere, next to his big pay lake. Tyler Childress at like 16 or 17 years old played for us on a porch by himself with a little tiny PA. And he entertained me. And I said, man, this guy might be good. I said, I hope he don't go to Nashville. And somehow he avoided getting perverted by Nashville. And what is he trying? What is he doing? So I don't know if it's his goal to save Nashville and country from itself, right? But that's what he's doing, right? But they can't acknowledge that. So when they award this guy, they have to give him they have to call his music Americana. It's not Americana, it's country. That's how far that country has shifted. Just like America shifts politically from one end of the spectrum to another, country has shifted to something else that's not real and genuine.
Well, but at the same time, to be fair, it's like with every single bit of music that I hear on broadcast radio and the other various, places that you go out into the mall and the Home Depot and places like that. And all of the music kind of is made in such a fashion that it all blends together no matter what quote unquote genre it is. And then the genre, really all it is the flavor of the guitar. The same licks are being played, except over in country, they're just adding a little twang to it. There's a certain thing that they do to the production that makes it stand apart as country. And of course, there's a fiddle pop in every once in a while. And the lead singer is always going to be some sassy Southern person with something sassy to say, and they're going to look like $1 million or whatever the fuck. But hip hop is dipping its fucking like whole entire arm into country lately, from everybody to Kanye and beyond. Little X made a fortune doing it, and also made Billy Ray Cyrus even more money, which he really needs that.
Now, have you seen a picture of Tyler Childress? He's a normal human being, right? He's thinking about real shit that happens right here. It has happened to him. He's actually living, right? The things he's doing just like George Jones and living out the songs he wrote. You understand what I'm saying? And all this stuff. I know a lot of people think when they talk about poverty, they associate it with up north and big cities and black people and stuff like that, but we got poverty here that's real, right? And they got real drug epidemic that's real, right? I mean, it's why we're raising our grandkids because of that, right? It hits every strata and every social group, right? So for somebody that can come out and speak about that genuinely and put it to music, and you believe in them and what they have to say, that's what makes Tyler Childers the most interesting new artist or newer artist in the country genre. And he really hit about 2017. Have you ever seen his videos? Some of them are downright psychedelic.
And of course I'm going to go back and listen to this one and make sure that everybody that is everybody's input is. I'm going to listen to all of it because really I'm just in that mood right now.
You are listening to the Balls Out Podcast. Make sure to give us a thumbs up, comment, share and subscribe so that you can help this podcast grow.
The internet has really the internet's changed things because again, Kyle, how old are you again?
37.
So you are the baby of the group, and there is just a slight little bit of drop off. You're still old enough to remember some of the last remnants of the quote unquote wild good old days. But you know, people in this day and age, particularly the younger generation, don't understand how important it was to live in a remote area and have this lifeline thrown to you from the neighboring large city, broadcasting this devil's music or, whatever your household inclination was at that point.
I remember being a young kid going to a secondhand store in the blue collar town that I grew up in and buying cassette tapes, buying records, listening to the radio. I mean, that was there wasn't a computer in our house till I was out of high school.
I listened to the Louisiana Hayride. Have y'all ever heard of the Louisiana Hayride?
I have.
Yeah.
And
Elvis got started there.
And I'd hear it on AM radio out of Chicago, believe it or not. And and get in Eastern Kentucky. And then there was the King Biscuit Flower Hour guys. That was amazing.
I've definitely checked out the King Flower Hour on quite a few occasions. All the old guys, all the old heads, man, if you can ever find any of that stuff, you need to dig it up. Of course, we have YouTube now. We can find all of the stuff that we're talking about tonight.
Oh, there was an Ozzy Osbourne concert with Randy Rose that was on King Biscuit Flower Hour, and it blew my mind, and I found it.
Oh, wow.
In Pittsburgh, the old 96.9 station, prior to it becoming Bob FM and just being completely bastardized by We Play Anything, it was another classic rock station. It was, the call letters were WRK, and every Sunday was the Grateful Dead hour from 9 to 10 p.m. And they found tapes, they found anything, and they would just play an hour of good Grateful Dead, and sometimes they let it rip for about 3 or 4 hours. It was absolutely fantastic. And there were other things like they, you would sit there.
Now, look, in that setting, I bet if I was probably subjected to that, and so that's kind of where I was going with what I was talking about a minute ago, that the way that people used to absorb music as a medium versus the way they absorb it now, because now it's more just background music. It's It's, you know, something to play when you enter a room. You know, it's just, I don't know. It's about little moments, and it's not really about a larger picture anymore.
And new music,
You know?
you heard it through the radio, right? Like
Correct.
I mean,
I had a very cheap ass radio, probably like like $40 CD combo radio. So it wasn't like I had audiophile shit. I had cheap shit, but that was, to me, like the
We did,
greatest
but we
part.
weren't allowed to play with it.
I mean, like I said, it's I can't describe to someone, you know, what it was like to hear, you know, Cumberland Blues, or, you know, Sugar Magnolia, or this shit through the radio, and you're just hearing the jams, and you're just going, you know, hey, this is the Grateful Dead from Europe '72 playing at the Lyceum Theater, and you're like, wow, this was cool.
Now that's good. Yeah, that's a good time frame for them.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I consider myself extremely blessed, and like my friends, one of my best friends named Chris, him and his dad were big Deadheads. My mom loved the Dead too, and it was just like, when I finally got into it, it just it just clicked for me. So for me, it was always good stuff, and and I'm not trying to segue into the topic tonight, but I was telling there was a guy at work that's starting to get into class. He's like in his early 20s. He's getting into vinyl. God bless his soul. He came up and said, you know, what are some classic rock albums that he should get? And I gave him a list, but the one I told him about, and I said, you got to take me seriously. I said, you got to buy Dark Side of the Moon. I said, you got to take an hour out of your life. Don't have your phone on you. Don't have any distractions. And listen to Dark Side of the Moon consecutive. Hear how it was originally intended for the first time, and get that experience with that album. To me, I said, you're probably thinking, and I told the kid, you're probably thinking I'm fucking weird, but I said, it will change you. You will understand why people say they had their experience with that album, why it's so revered. But I said, if you don't do that and you fuck around with it, you'll never understand what I'm trying to tell you.
I remember the first time.
You gotta get stoned. You gotta get stoned when you first listen to that album.
The first time I ever heard it on CD was in Okeechobee in 1985. I bought the CD of Dark Side of the Moon, and I had a decent stereo, that all pawn shop stuff I put together from, you know, different coast towns there in Florida. And anyway, and on a CD, I was just amazed by how it sounded. And that was one of the second or third CD I ever heard to listen to it. It was even made it yet another experience of discovering Dark Side of the Moon for me, which I originally heard on an 8-track in somebody's car, you know.
So how I got a copy of Dark Side of the Moon, I would say 13 or 14 years old. And I was over at my buddy's house, and that shelf had broken at his house, and there was just shit all over the place. And we were just trying to clean this up, and I threw some shit in my bag. I'm just, because we didn't want to get our ass beat. But it was, you know, I go home that night and I'm going through my bag. I'm like, I don't know what the hell this is, that, just pitching shit. And I find this CD, and it has all these prisms on it, and it's a Dark Side of the Moon CD. I'm like, okay, I'll give it a listen. And I didn't listen to it right away. I think it was probably that weekend. I had just gotten new AA batteries. So that was again, for those folks that didn't have rechargeables in the house, and when you got new batteries,
that's me.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. And I put it in the CD player, and I just listened to it with like the shittiest pair of headphones. And I just remember
probably the headphones that came with the Walkman or whatever off-brand CD player it was.
It was this portable CD player that was one of the first anti-skip models, and I just remember being fancy for me.
Yeah.
And
Mr. Big Shot over here.
I know. I felt like King of the Hill when I was 13, 14 years old.
Hell yeah.
Wow.
And I just remember listening to it and going, wow, this shit changed forever for me. Like, because it just gave me a new perspective on music. Like I never heard anything like that before. I mean, in my house, there was always like Steely Dan, Herb Alpert, the Tijuana Brass, the Grateful
Yeah.
Dead, the Beatles.
Ours was more Herb Alpert, but then it branched off more into the jazz stuff. You know, my parents were a little bit overly religious, so there was a lot of
Did you have Chuck
a lot
Mangione?
of instrumental music, but it was good instrumental music. I actually was blessed in that regard to be exposed to John McLaughlin and Mahavishnu Orchestra, Leo Kottke, John Fahey, anybody that was a badass guitar player. I got to hear about them and read about them at a young age because Dad also collected the old guitar players all the way back into the early 70s. They've been around for a couple of years at that point.
Yeah,
Didn't have some of those first, the very first black and white editions that have Jimi Hendrix in it that are worth so much money.
Wow.
But you know, that's how I, you know, kind of worked my way backwards. And yeah, 13 is when I discovered Pink Floyd, but it was the only album that my dad would allow in the house that was obscured by clouds. He was a really big fan of that one.
Love the album.
That's a great fucking album, and it holds up, man. It really does.
Underrated album. That's one. It's unfortunately stuck in between, I believe, Metal and Dark Side of the Moon.
Well, it is also a soundtrack too. So, you know, there was a lot of controversy as far as it being a proper Pink Floyd album back in the day, which has luckily been sussed out.
It sounds proper to me, goddammit.
Yes, yeah. It is.
Absolutely.
And it has continuity. There's actually kind of a, you know, disjointed story that they're telling there, even if you've never seen the movie. I can't, something about an island. I can't remember the name of the movie, but no, but the one that really hooked me though, because I liked Obscured by Clouds, but again, I was kind of young, so I didn't really understand a lot of the concepts that they were playing with. The Wall at age 14, that I kind of, you know, Dad grudgingly let me listen to, and I actually got to see one of the uncensored viewings that MTV, in the early days of MTV, I would say probably in their first few years of existence, offered up a late night, one night at midnight screening of The Wall uncensored, because, you know, there's boobies in it. Babies in a sex scene and a few other little naughty bits, you know, that children children my age shouldn't be subjected to. But man, you want to talk about a trip. And thank God people have often said something about trying to watch that movie on acid. Thank God I've never tried that, because I don't think I could stand that. That's a bit much.
I remember in high school, The Wall was mythologized. It was always like, you know, if you wore anything Pink Floyd or said you liked Pink Floyd, the very next question was, did you see The Wall? And no one ever did. And it was always mythologized. I remember the first time I saw it, I don't know, I got a VHS copy somehow, some way, and put it on. And I just remember going, holy shit, what the fuck did I just watch? It broke me. I'm not gonna lie. It impacted me in a way, but it broke me in a way, because I still can't.
But for me though, luckily I was able at that young of an age, finally able to piece together the story I'd heard on the album that it just blew me the fuck away for some reason or another. There was a really creepy vibe about that album still to this day. Yeah, you know, after repeated listenings, you know, and kind of really understanding the full story behind it, and the fact that it really kind of was the beginning of the end for Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
You know, Roger Waters' ego had finally emerged and wasn't going to let go.
And going into that movie, I'd never listened to The Wall. Like, the only thing I've ever heard from The Wall, and I didn't know it was from The Wall going into the movie, was Another Brick in the Wall part 2. Don't understand. I don't ask how I couldn't put 2 and 2 together to get 4.
Well, yeah, but out of context though, that, and you know, you listen to the song and okay, yeah, so we don't need it, yeah, okay, whatever. You don't really understand what it's about until you see this whole story that you know, the movie, and really, which was done under Roger Waters' careful and observation, it really did. It was a good visualization for what he was trying to put together. Even as seemingly disjointed as it could be, because, again, stuff like that didn't really exist in the modern plane.
It was his opus.
Now the animation during, I think it's Goodbye Blue Sky,
Goodbye,
Blue Sky, and it turns
the
into
flower.
the flower. Then it goes on into being an iron bird of death and destruction. The whole position, everything in between. When the first time I seen it, it just boggled my imagination, right? And I can feel what he was really talking about, which I feel is not only did his dad die in World War II at Anzio, which they talk about in the movie extensively, but in the songs, but he also experienced the Blitz, right? And a lot of people forget that Paul McCartney and John Lennon and people like that and Roger Waters experienced the Blitz, right? So they, the bombers come in, man. They could have got done in at any time. So he had a lot of psychosis as a result of World War II, and I believe he had to share that with everybody,
And the way that movie weaves the animated sequences and the really just the hazy, pink on the road sequences and versus his childhood and all that other stuff. I mean, stuff like that didn't really exist. Pulp Fiction pretty much, kind of Quentin Tarantino made a whole entire career out of something that, kind of been around for a while. And that was just a narrative that wasn't, it fit so squarely with the album. And it finally told that story in such a way that I don't think a lot of movies did in and around then. And I'm not saying that we didn't have movies with animation and stuff like that, but just as completely incohesive as it may seem to somebody that's uninitiated, and when you burrow your way into it, it just paints such a complete picture. It really is. It's such a shock when you first see it, though. Man, if you're not ready for it, it'll kick you in the nuts.
At 16.
Wow.
So what? Now, do y'all ever seen American Pop? If you compare American Pop to The Wall, they're two completely different animals, right? And that was the kind of animation that people were putting.
That's Don Bluth, I believe, did the animation in that, correct?
Yes, and I do love the movie, but it's just not
The Secret of Nim. Man, that guy, an amazing animator.
I mean,
was that Ralph Bakshi? Or was that Ralph Bakshi? I can't remember. Those two had similar styles.
Watership. If you want to go there, I'd go Watership Down, right?
Yeah.
That was
has anybody mentioned Sid Barrett yet?
Not yet.
Well,
we got this far in and nobody mentioned.
Hey, we kind of devoted a lot of time to Pink Floyd, and in the chat, we kind of mentioned something about a quick discussion about the recent, and I'm talking about like 2023, Roger Waters and David Gilmour, their public spat that just keeps just when you think it's going to go away, there's a headline that just flames it right back up again. And suddenly Roger Waters is an anti-Semite. And suddenly David Gilmour is just a big, fat, greedy pig. And yada, yada, this, that, and the other. Capitalism, so on and so forth.
So
David Gilmour will fly the pig around with testicles on.
And ride that motherfucker with both fingers up. That's pretty much what he's been able to do. And I think he was rather successful, all said and told, because he cashed in on the nostalgia and that the people that had grown up having those experiences when that album first dropped back in the 70s, back, when we were all born or kids or whatever the case may be.
Oh, a friend of mine's older brother went and seen animals. This is how I found out about Pink Floyd. So we're talking like 1976, right? And I'm like maybe 9 years old. And a friend of mine's brother had went and seen animals, and he talked about them with the pig and on, and the dog. They had a dog howling on stage, and I just blew my mind. So I was looking for any Pink Floyd I could get my hands on, but the only thing I could find anywhere was Umaga, right? Which has the most
interesting album.
Yeah, it had the most interesting song title of all time, in my opinion. Can you think of the song that I'm thinking about?
Colorful with that axe, Eugene?
No, that's a very interesting title. I'm thinking about 10,000 species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave grooving with a pick. That's one of the songs
I would say this for me, in kind of like after I listened to Dark Side of the Moon, and then after I watched The Wall, and this is completely random, but for where Pink Floyd really started to get the same time. Again, I'm 16 years old. I would try to stay up late to watch old school ECW wrestling on UPN, but I would always crash halfway through, and then I'd wake up to infomercials, and they always played the Pink Floyd Echoes, the best of Pink Floyd, 30-minute infomercial, and it was on like week after week, and I think I watched the whole thing at least a dozen times because it's all they played late at night, and it really then dawned on me like this group is pretty big and pretty important, and you might want to start putting 2 and 2 together and try to get 4 because they're the truth.
Oh yeah, they're really good. And but the fact that there's so much angst between them now, I mean, it's to people to spend that much time together and to get that kind of bitterness, it really has to be heavy. I mean, you look at on the Final Cut, he tried to hire him as the band, really, and he just and Richard Wright, Roger Waters just treated him like dirt, and then he wanted to hire him as a member instead of him being a member.
And look, man, to be fair, there was a lot of cocaine going around at that particular.
Oh, I'm sure.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
My thing on Roger Waters is I think he just became like there's a psychological and mental, like how Sid kind of went drugs and kind of burned himself out. I think Roger Waters burned himself out and like went mentally fucked up, just creating the wall. They broke Pink Floyd. The Final Cut was literally the final cut with them together. But I think he mentally lost it, and I don't think he's really mentally recovered. I mean, if you watch that thing I sent in the chat about Roger Waters talking about the anti-Semitism, Nazism, and then just if you read between the lines when you watched it, my biggest takeaway is he is either so narcissistic and thinks he's God's great creation, or he's just mentally fucked. It's one of the two.
I think it's both. I mean, really, he's narcissistic beyond belief, though. That's obvious. And he may even be a psychopath or a sociopath.
Yeah, but
right?
I mean, look, I'm gonna go bigger picture for a second here, because let's not kid ourselves. Some of the greatest music that we've enjoyed over the years has been made by some absolutely sick motherfuckers.
Oh yeah,
James Brown, Chuck Berry, the fucking entire Led Zeppelin. I don't know. Robert Plant's kind of trying to scrub up his image a little bit, but with Alison Krauss, Jerry Lee Lewis. Oh my God, that guy!
Goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
Speaking of cocaine,
I mean, there's no doubt about that component that you got to be kind of out there, because in order to create something like they did, like think about this. Like if I go and attempt to write something musically like these guys did, I'm not even entering the exosphere of their abilities. Like that level of where they're at is so beyond my even skill set. And even when I dabbled a little bit with a couple of groups whenever I thought I could be a rock star, and obviously that didn't work out, you appreciate what these...
What did you play?
Drums.
You were a drummer?
Yep.
Damn,
Doug, all we need now is a bassist, and we've got a band here.
There you go. Rock and roll guys.
But the thing is, my best drum beats, solos, all that stuff doesn't even come even remotely close to like a Nick Mason. And like I said, you start to wonder like how these guys created. You got to be fucked in the head somehow to do some of this shit.
No,
Like,
as a musician, I feel I can replicate other people's stuff and I can practice it and get it down. But the imagination to have created it is what takes it to another level, and that's why I mentioned fake country. Is there's not a whole lot of imagination there, you know, and so they're not taking anybody to the next level. Whereas Pink Floyd, I mean, they were more than competent musicians, some of the greatest to ever live, but they had an imagination and the ability to produce that they could make their visions become reality, and their visions were pretty, obviously pretty amazing, you know.
my favorite part of Pink Floyd is David Gilmour's vocals. I think, with a lot of singers as they get older, they obviously they get slightly worse because everything gets broken up.
Their lungs start giving out.
Correct. But you listen to David Gilmour, like whenever they did Live 8, all the little, like they bust the Endless River out. I know they only did very little vocals of his. He's like fine wine. It just sounds so good. Like there's something like beautiful with his voice. That's another thing that always transfixed me on Floyd is just his vocals. Like I tried like all hell to sing like David Gilmour, and boy did I sound like a Yinzer.
A Yinzer?
Yeah.
What's a Yinzer?
Yinzer's is a way to describe a Pittsburgher. So I sounded like Yinzer Floyd. It was awful, but I tried so hard.
There was a guy, when you said that, made me think of a guy I heard on Pittsburgh radio, and I was listening to I was in Moon, staying in a motel in Moon, and I was working building phone equipment, and I heard a guy come on the radio, and they was talking about the Pittsburgh. He goes, he stomped him with a hobnail boot, and he had that accent. It'd like to kill me. It's the greatest thing I ever heard on the radio, you know?
Oh, dude, that's Pittsburghese to a T.
Yeah.
But if you're ever in Moon, I'd live 10 minutes from there. So if you ever travel back up this way.
Well, that's where I would stay at the hotel. That was the one right next to the airport, and it had a little bar.
And you're going to be back on the road now, right?
Oh yeah,
so you're gonna find your way up that way. So I expect a full report. We probably need to go ahead, if that happens. We need to try to go ahead and schedule a cast to where the two of y'all can face each other and tell each other these things, looking at each other.
I think
me and Doug used to do that once upon a time.
Yep.
Yeah. The live video ones, actually.
Does everybody have a favorite Pink Floyd album? And let's go.
Ooh.
For me, it's "Wish You Were Here," right? "Wish You Were Here," the technical wizardry of it, right? Obviously the song "Wish You Were Here" is great. "Welcome to the Machine," the way it sounds on an incredible stereo or a set of headphones is just beyond belief, right? But for me, what really makes "Wish You Were Here" my favorite is that when they break into jazz fusion at the end on like parts 6 through 9 of "Shine On You Crazy Diamond," it is amazing.
Now hold on, now don't disrespect "Have a Cigar" with Roy Harper.
Oh yeah, "Have a Cigar" is incredible, right? I love that song. But if you ever listen to the end of "Wish You Were Here" as it fades out with that jazz fusion funk going on, I mean, it is the song, the "Shot on You Crazy Diamond," I believe is it parts 6 through 9, and it goes into it just incredible. I mean, they're just so tight, it's so in sync, and then that's my.
I have to agree with you. I can fall asleep to that album. Seriously, I listen to that album probably 15 or 20 times a year.
Oh yeah, I used to fall asleep to it all the time.
Doug, quick side note: you mentioned Roy Harper being the lead singer of
Have a Cigar.
Have a Cigar. Roy Harper got canceled. He apparently diddled the children.
They canceled him. I mean, they killed the motherfucker.
No, they didn't kill him, but he diddled children. So
I thought that was the new effort, was to legalize pedophilia.
Ooh.
I hope.
Anyway, I mean, I'm not supporting that effort, right?
So, dovetailing off of Robert, my favorite Pink Floyd album, when I first started getting into Floyd, probably was my least favorite. But as I've gotten older and I've gotten to understand the lyrics and the story being told, and it's really apropos to today, my favorite's Animals. And
oh yeah,
when you listen to it and you start to look at it and you're like, the fuck do they mean by dogs and sheep? You're like, if you don't immerse yourself and try to understand what they're trying to get Roger Waters is getting across, it's kind of like dividing society up into these three groups. And, you listen to it, it's I listen to like the guitar solo on, I think it's Dogs, and just listening to Gilmour just go on is just, it to me. It takes me to a place like very few, like whether it's echoes from metal, dogs from animals, and comfortably numb from the wall. Gilmour's guitar work takes me somewhere that, like, I can't explain, but like mentally, it's such a nirvana that it's there for me.
You want me to tell you my honest opinion, and this is something that nobody has ever brought up before, at least not anywhere that I've ever seen, was the quiet musical, I guess, competition that Pink Floyd and Genesis were having that ultimately Pink Floyd won. Because again, what was it, 75, 76 is when Lamb Lies Down on Broadway happened. And then, of course, the great big implosion with Gabriel leaving. In my mind, probably that era's finest rock drummer, Phil Collins, pushed to the microphone. And, he was able to pull off drums and singing, but after a while, he had to get out from behind the set. And I mean, that, of course, diminished him on drums right out of the bat. I'm sorry. It did. I mean, look, Phil Collins is an amazing drummer. I'm not taking anything away from him, because when he sang and played drums at the same time, he was still phenomenal. There's very few people that could do it with the skill and precision that he did. That being said, his drumming was 5,000% better, and 5,000 more, just completely just light years beyond anything that anybody else was doing when Peter Gabriel was at the front. Yep. That being said, Peter Gabriel could also kind of wander in some, wispy avenues and, tiptoeing through the forest with the antlers and so on and so forth. I mean, so you had to endure a little bit of that, whereas Pink Floyd really came at it from more of a working man's perspective that I think was probably sharpened to just an absolute point when The Wall was finally released. And, and all of the observations that they had made as a band and made statements as they made along, really, that's where, I still to this day, The Wall is still my favorite. I don't know why, because as I've listened to it over the years, the album has aged, whereas Dark Side of the Moon is still, it's still the future. It's still the sound of the future.
I love The Wall, and I think if you were to ask me my top Pink Floyd albums, I don't know if The Wall would make my top 5, as controversial as that.
And the thing is that over the years, I think that's whereas I've asked, would talk to people about The Wall 20 years ago versus now. I think a lot of people's observation, I don't know if that's because of their observation about Pink Floyd as the human being band that has had all of this scuffle and tumult and, I don't know. I mean, it could point to a lot of different things.
If you go back tonally, I want to go back tonally to Animals, right? It's interesting that he brought up Animals because there's one thing happening on Animals that's not happening on the other Pink Floyd record. And what that is he's playing a Les Paul. He's a known Stratocaster.
I was going to bring up the different guitar. I didn't know the exact guitar because you had brought up there, Robert, in Wish You Were Here, the awesomeness of Have a Guitar. And I would tell people, if you love Have a Guitar from Wish You Were Here, you got to listen to Pig's 3 different ones because it has
Have a Cigar,
fills,
Have a Guitar.
And it's some of Roger Waters' best bass lines.
Yeah. But the Les Paul has a completely different tonal character. It's meatier. It stings more, and that fits with Animals, right? Whereas he was bringing up the other solos like Comfortably Numb. It's that's really smooth, right? And he's really riding the reverb and stuff and the delay and stuff like that. And that's the only time he used a Les Paul, kind of like Mark Knopfler mostly played Stratocasters, but also stuff he plays Les Paul. But just that's interesting. So I always wonder, because they're talking always there's David Gilmour reissue Stratocasters and stuff like that. But I've always wondered what happened to the Les Paul he played on Animals, and what would it be worth today?
Oh, well, he's probably still got that one in the closet there somewhere. He still has a sizable guitar collection, from what I understand.
Oh yeah. So I mean, and the reason I bring it up,
how many guitars does he have on that boat studio thing he has? That motherfucker's got more money than God. I mean, well, not necessarily, because God, being Paul McCartney, still kicking, still doing his thing, cashing them checks in.
So speculation is
YouTube.
Speculation is that Jimmy Page's Les Paul will be the most valuable music instrument ever sold on his passing.
I've heard that, and I've also heard if Brian May were ever to sell the Red Special, that would go for some major.
No, but he's made more than one copy of those, because the Red Special is a guitar that he made himself.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
It's debatable. Question for you guys I was hoping we would get into this. So, do you, number one, because I remember Roger Waters saying, if like 5 years ago or something, he wanted to reimagine The Wall, and it really never came to fruition. And he's now saying he wants to reimagine Dark Side of the Moon. Do you think number one does it? Do you think number one does it?
Wall is a very personal. The Wall is a very personal statement that he was making from his perspective about his life. That part, okay, if you want to quote unquote reimagine it with the session players or whatever, that's fine, and cash in on some of the Pink Floyd money. Because let's be honest, that's exactly what this is about. It has nothing to do with artistic vision.
Correct.
Fuck that shit. He's retreading the same old ground with different musicians. There's not going to be any new twists. There might be some, little fancy little gadget or something like that that's not really going to add or detract from any of the major content.
Shit like that really hurts the integrity of the whole thing.
At the same time, he didn't really get to cash in like the band did. A lot of people will argue, and in court that's justly, that's what's that?
When Pink Floyd broke up, the rights that he got was The Wall and the Pig.
Mm-hmm.
Gilmour, Wright, and Mason got the rest.
Yeah. So at the same time, he didn't have to go that route with it. He could have, and that's kind of what the judge was quietly saying. Well, hey, why don't you just get along with these guys? Y'all make some more music, and everybody make money, right?
I will say this. I really liked how he reimagined. I think that it's on YouTube, Comfortably Numb. I really enjoyed how he reimagined that. It's different. It's more darker than I can imagine. So I'm curious, but if he's thinking that this is going to be something big, I don't think that it can. And I think he's going to have to get, and I don't think he has it up there. I think he's going to think this is going to be on the Billboard for 741 weeks. This is going to be.
I'm going to step apart from what you're saying. I'm going to take the Paul McCartney route, and the songs that he played and performed and wrote with John Lennon, went out and played those songs. He played those as that song. Mm-hmm. And Comfortably Numb, I because that's a really personal song with me, because I fucking love Gilmour's guitar solo on that.
Oh
it
my
is
God,
just,
yeah.
that is probably one of his top 5 moments in Pink Floyd ever. What's that?
Do you prefer the studio version or like the live version? Like, did you ever listen to the live 80 to 81 shows that they had? I always loved listening to Comfortably Numb live.
I actually, believe it or not, and it's funny you mentioned that, within the past month, caught that. I can't remember which tour stop it was, but I caught one of those shows and it was good. Oh God, it was so good.
Yeah, Pulse has a great one. Live 8, I thought it was absolutely one of my favorite. It's just, I think they were like fine wine, and it's just no wonder they were offered, as soon as they walked off the stage, $2 billion to reunite.
Hell yeah.
I mean, but of course, Roger Waters and his integrity, and I'm sure that had to sting. I mean, what did you say that was again? The wall and the pig, and then get the fuck out.
Yep, that was
all that dark side money, which was still, but that dark side money was still pumping. I mean, still pumping while that court verdict was written.
And the key thing, it was originally supposed to just be the wall, but when I think David Gilmour put testicles on the pig and flew it around the Battersea Power Dam in London, he got so irate that he's like, "You're not putting balls on my pig." So that's what he got. That's from what I've read in Nick Mason's book Inside and Out. So it's crazy to think we've talked this far and we really haven't talked about their landmark first album.
Well, and because again, you have to include Syd Barrett in that story, and that is such a just awfully tragic story of, and you can't bring that story up and not talk about Rocky Erickson at 13th Floor Elevators either, because I think there's a lot of similarities there about untreated mental illness or misdiagnosed mental illness that was just, you think about the medications that are available today, and somebody just gave just a little bit to Syd to pull him out of it, and kind of bring him back to, oh shit, man, what happened? Oh, I woke up, and then start playing music again. Luckily, late in his life, Rocky was able to do that and actually put on some fine performances right before he passed.
Hell yeah.
If Sgt. Pepper's is arguably the greatest psychedelic album from that era, that's what everyone.
It is.
Is Piper at the Gates of Dawn number 2?
Oh,
I would have went Electric Ladyland, but Piper at the Gates of Dawn is definitely of 67. So you got to remember, it's a special record for me because Pink Floyd's coming out party was at the Beatles' Summer of Love party with Andy Warhol, and that happened the day I was born. So my life literally encompasses the entire career of Pink Floyd from July 8th of 1967, right? It just meant a lot to me, and I've seen the videos of that where they show everybody sitting around at the party and stuff like that, and they got goofy like animal heads on and crap like that, and I was like, wow, Pink Floyd was so good that they played the most important party of the 60s that defined the entire hippie generation, until Woodstock.
I mean, there are some folks that feel that Piper is not just a psychedelic album, but also a concept album. And a couple major writers have always felt that it's the greatest concept album. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think it's one of those all-time Pink Floyd albums that I hate to use the word underrated. I think it's underrated by fans the most because you're going to get the big four for people's top Pink Floyd albums, whether it's The Wall, Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, or Animals. But Piper at the Gates of Dawn might be one that gets pushed down the list a little bit. And I think it's one of their stronger things. Interstellar Overdrive is up there for me as one of my favorite songs that they've ever done.
Hell yeah. Now they were just doing the fact that you do something completely different than anyone else, right? Mm-hmm. In a world where everybody was trying to be different, right? Yeah. And where individualism in music and thought and imagination and ideas was the norm of the day for that generation, for the younger people, to have did something so completely different that it left a mark that's lasted so long. Now, I always wonder when I think about Pink Floyd and I think about the Beatles and I think about Led Zeppelin, is it going to be like Mozart, where 350 years from now, right, people are going to be referring to the Piper at the Gates of Dawn? Is that crazy, or do you think that could happen?
No, I mean, it's possible.
It is. It really is. I mean, but I think they're very. Each of those artists are very distinct in their ways, and that's where it'll be interesting how people look at them. I mean, unfortunately, we won't be here to see it, but I think their music, much like how like Wagner and Beethoven and Mozart is, there will be an audience for it.
I thought Wagner got canceled too.
I still love Wagner. The hell with it. I mean, I don't know. They're going to cancel everything.
You anti-Semite.
Can't you just
see how this conversation came full circle?